that this evening we are joined by Gillian Hovell, also known to many of you as the Muddy Archaeologist. And this evening she's going to be talking to us about the original Olympics. I must tell you that we are recording tonight's summer school blog for GDPR purposes, so just to let you know. Now, if you have any questions for Gillian, please wait till after she's given her talk. But all during her talk, you can just use the chat button to make sure you get your question in, and then we'll get to it at the end, and she can answer. Now, after graduating in Latin and ancient history from Exeter University, Gillian worked in BBC television and went on to become an award-winning freelance writer, author, and public speaker specialising in archaeology, prehistory, and in the Greek and Roman eras, as well as in Latin. She now lectures for York University and for the British Museum in London, and regularly speaks on cruises, tours, and internationally, as well as throughout the UK. Gillian encourages us to see that ancient history and our connections to the past are full of human life and passion. She aims to change the way we see our work and leisure, human nature, and the world around us. History and archaeology are not just about the past, they're everywhere, and they add colour, depth, and meaning to our lives today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Gillian, the Muddy Archaeologist.
Thank you very much indeed, John, and it's lovely to be here. It's lovely to see you. What a shame we're not all in person, but we'll get round to that. We really will. And in the meantime, good to have you here this evening. And let's get the first screen up and going. Let's get everything sorted. It's just, there we are. Right, you should now be able to see the front slide. The original Olympics, a 3,000-year-old sacred tradition. And as we look ahead to our actual Olympics happening in 2021, it's nice to know where it's all come from and how it all happened. And indeed, whether there were things that we still do that they did so many years ago, and whether there are things that we do not do, and perhaps it's just as well that we don't, to be perfectly honest. So let's go exploring and seeing what the original Olympics really were about. And it all began in 776 BC. And it was scheduled for the first full moon after the summer solstice, which is about mid-July. So we stick to that tradition for the summer Olympics. And it was started in Olympia, hence the Olympic. Olympia is a place in Greece, and it's about there on the Peloponnese, the maize bit. And Olympia is a very special place indeed. It's a sanctuary of Zeus. It's a temple area. But as we shall see, it's far more than just a temple. It has the temple with the statue of Zeus, but it's an area where you have many activities going on. And these activities will include the games. It's a beautiful area. It's not just a temple area. It was said that Heracles, that's the Greek version of Hercules, first planted a sacred temenos, a sacred area around that area. And that's protected, and you would be killed if you cut down the trees. So we are in holy territory. It's not just a sporting event. It really is something for the gods, to celebrate the gods, to, well, celebrate really. And they are Panhellenic, which means it's not just for the area around Olympia, it's for everyone who is Greek. Now, this map shows you where there's green, ignore the purple, where there's green, it's where the Greeks settled. And not everyone knows that the Greeks didn't just live around the Aegean. They spread out, especially in the 700s and 600s BC, the first years of the Olympic Games. And you can see they went all the way around the Black Sea, along much of the northern areas and of the Mediterranean, so southern Italy, even down into France, what was Gaul, and Spain, and the islands, and Sicily, and even into Africa. And Olympia and these areas become a hub for being Greek. Now, Greek isn't a nation, it's a culture. So I might say, I come from Athens, but you come from Sparta, and you come from Corinth. These are different city-states, different polis. And you would say we are Greek in culture, but I am Spartan, you are Corinthian, etc. There is a great divide as well. And yet they all have the same Greek language. They all celebrate. Homer is writing about this time. and they all have the same gods, including Zeus. So they come back, many can come back to the festivals to enjoy them, but every 4 years, heralds are sent out from Olympia to all these places and say, this is a call for participants. It was a month's warning, but then it was 3 months warning. There was a truce because people were often fighting each other. And there was a truce for the 3 months, during which time people could go to the games, travel. You couldn't hinder an athlete from getting there. You couldn't have war with other city-states. So it becomes a Panhellenic, all the Greeks are all combined in it. It is a bringing together of, they go back to their arguments and everything afterwards, but you had to respect that truce. If you didn't, you were barred from the games in the future. So it's a big world. It's not just a little city. Now, that sanctuary, this is what it looks like at the end of it all. It started with a temple of Zeus. It has a temenos, an area around it. And you will see there are other temples tucked in. And then there are all sorts of buildings throughout the Greek period and the Roman period, which are built. You have treasuries where the different city-states have put their winnings and their treasures, but you have a gymnasium for athletics, palaestra, an exercise area. You have the starting gate for the horse races down here. As we shall see, a Roman hotel is there. There's a swimming pool, Greek baths. It's a buzz. It's full of all sorts of activities going on, different stadiums of different dates, etc. So it isn't just a simple go to the temple and do your games. This is a sporting village by the end of it all, a celebration, a worshipping, connecting with the divine rituals that you have to do. So you get there if you're participating, and you spend 1 month training on site or nearly at site in the Olympic village. And it was tents to start with. You came and you put up your tent and you trained for a month. You had your trainer with you who dealt with diet and exercise and your physique and the like. And nearby, a few miles away, is a town of Elis. And that's the host town because the sanctuary isn't set up for that. So you have the host town and your Olympic village, and all the participants are arranged in groups, arranged by lot, by the I can never say this, Hellenodica. I apologize to those of you who do Greek better than I do. They're the judges. Originally 1 person, and then it's spread to 12 and 10 various. Previously called the agonothetai, which is the competitors. Now, agony comes from the Greek word for competition, for competing against each other. Agony is an effort to try to be the first. It's not your speed that matters. It's being the first. It's being the winner. It doesn't matter if it was slower than last year, as long as you're the first this year. So these judges, they're all handpicked from Elis. It used to be hereditary, then they were handpicked. And they're making sure that your behavior is right, your character is right, your morality even, as well as your strength and stamina. And you had to have been training for 10 months previous, so you had to be up to the mark. You couldn't let the whole thing down. So we get lots of vases with a judge standing by or a trainer standing by and assessing the participants from all over the Greek world. And just as today, they have an opening procession. You start in a grand way. You have a big grand opening. And there are oaths to be made by the judges who say that they will
Right, I'm sorry. It seems as though we've temporarily lost Gillian, so we will try and get her back as quick as we can. Okay, sorry, slight technical issues. We're still working on getting Gillian back if we can.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know what has happened there. My connection was still there. It was strong. So I now need to be able to share my screen again, please. I need to be allowed back in on that. If Rachel or John could just enable me to share my screen, make me co-host, that would be fab. And then we can get on. Isn't technology wonderful? Here we go. Right. There we are. And we're back. You know what? The ancient Greeks didn't have to deal with technology, did they? Perhaps somebody cursed me. I was talking about curses or magic, wasn't I? And we are back. No bribery of judges, though. Fines, exclusion, flogging, if you do any of these things. And if you are a Greek citizen, you're not meant to be able to be flogged. So this is an exceptional place. This is very, very different to your normal kind of life. Now, in the beginning, there was only one sport, and it was running, which you arranged in heats until you got to the final, and it was done by lots. And a writer in the centuries AD Philostratus wrote that a runner must have. Now, Dolicus runner is somebody who does a longer distance, should have shoulders and a neck about as strong as those of a pentathlete. That's the person who eventually, this is a bit later, describing how people who do 5 different sports, so they're strong all through their body. But he should have slender and light legs like a stadion runner. And we'll see what a stadion is shortly, which is literally our word stadium, a particular arena. These bring their legs into a sprint with their hands. So they're running like this. And here he is on a bars, as if their hands give them wings. Now, Dolicus runners do this only in the final sprint. You can't do it a long time. The rest of the time, it is almost as if they stride with their hands in a fist, for which they need strong shoulders. Watch the runners when they're in the Olympics. Watch how the sprinters run and watch how the longer distance runners run. And you need to maintain your strength, etc. So it's quite technical, and the physique has to be right. This is serious stuff. This needs practice. It needs exercise. It needs to get it right. It's not just a bunch of amateurs joining up for the fun of it. They're serious. There's your stadium. Now, this is in Delphi. Now, it's not just Olympia who has games. There are several others, and Delphi is one of them. And in 776, there was only this one run where you ran one stadium. I was lucky enough when I was at school that you used to be able to stand at the starting blocks and run on here. Obviously, now you can't. Too many visitors would destroy the place. Within 50 years, you would run 2 lengths of the stadium. And another 50 years on, there were these Dolicus ones who ran several times. It is a distance. But it's not like the marathon running out there. It's actually running round and round. So the turn is really difficult. It becomes more complicated. It's what human nature does. We have something and we then add bits. I say it's not the only place. Olympia down here in the Peloponnese has its sanctuary to Zeus, and the games are there. But the Pythian games, which are dedicated to Apollo, up here, and the Isthmian and the Nemean are down near Corinth. And one is to Poseidon, who is not just the god of the sea, but of horses. So horse racing is really important, and to Zeus. And then also Athens has its own games as well. But the first 4 are the really important ones that matter. What matters is the athletes as well. They are aiming for an ideal. Arete, a really important word for the Greeks, means excellence. And you can see the difference. It's 200 years on from the beginning of the Olympics. And yet in the archaic period that we're in, these kuroi, these nude youths are placed on grave markers. They are soldiers or they are athletes. And so they are celebrating in their nudity. Nobody but the ancient Greeks do nudity for free people. It's an insult for anyone else. But for them, it's a celebration of male youth. And by 430, we got Polyclitus's fantastic Diadomenos. This is a Roman copy of it. He's got his hands up because he's tying the victory ribbon around his head, and he's got his hands here as he ties it. And you can see how the art has moved on in that 150 odd years. And athleticism, excellence, youth, male youth especially. Be glad that we don't run naked, obviously. But you can see here that they did all of their sports naked. And there was a story that one of them had some little shorts on, and they had fallen down and had hindered him as he was running along. This is one of the stories to explain why you run naked. But there was a Greek culture in reality that celebrated male nudity. Now in 708, they added the pentathlon, pente for 5. You do the long jump, you do the discus, and here you can see the third chap from the left is holding a white piece, it's a discus. There's a javelin, the one on left of him, and there's running, and there's wrestling as well. The long jump is this chap holding 2 white things here, and we'll look at them in a bit. So all of these, you've got to be very different. Javelin is throwing this way, discus is throwing this way, wrestling is an all-over strength, long jump is very specific and very difficult, actually. And that discus could be made of stone or bronze or iron or lead. There were official ones which were kept tucked away in a treasury so that you had a particular weight. Imagine if everybody brought their own discus, different weights, etc. So here it has the swastika, which is a sign for eternity, really, and good luck in Greece. It's nothing bad at all. And you see his long jump weights, which he has, and a rake for flattening out the sand, the arena, so that it's when you've scuffed it all up. And of course, the famous discus thrower. There's a statue. We don't think they swirled round and round like we did. They think they just went on the spot and actually threw. And you can see the musculature required. The discus is slightly heavier than the modern discus, very slightly heavier. It's a lethal weapon. And there is a story of Apollo killing his young love by throwing a discus. And it could kill quite easily. And then there's the long jump. And it's not like ours, where you're running up to it and then jumping and hurling. You go from a standing start, but you have weights in your hand, which helps to heave you. It's been recorded that they jumped 15 meters. Now, no human being is jumping 15 meters. We think they did at least possibly 5 jumps from a standing start. So you leapt and you landed, and you leapt and you landed. And it was all about rhythm as well. So they played music at the same time to help with that rhythm. So it's a very technical thing. Here are 2 weights, which were found in Corinth, which has its own games, the Isthmian games. So you would hold them. They look heavy, don't they? It's a seriously, seriously difficult thing to do. Very physically different to ours. It's not the hop, skip, and a jump. It's a bit like that, but from a standing start, jump, jump, jump. 2 kilograms. Yes. Then, about 100 years after the start, they had boxing. And the hands are all strapped up in leather, and you've got the referee and the judge sitting there. They sit in purple robes in the best seats and the like. They've done all the rituals, and now they judge what's going on. And the boxing is pretty brutal, to be honest. People did get seriously injured, and some even died. So it is an all-out fight. This is where we have better rules, in that you stop. You're not permitted to injure, in that sense, at that level, anyone. And you start to get vases which are showing lots of them. So you have the boxing going on. You have the staves here, which they're raking the ground, or in this case, measuring out. The javelin thrower running, as you can see, they run before they throw. The music player, who helps all of the events to go smoothly, to keep the runners and the jumpers all moving, and a discus thrower. lots and lots and lots of vases show elements of the games. Now, the Pancratium. This is something we really don't want in our Olympic Games. 648 BC, quite early. And it's no holds barred almost. With boxing, you weren't allowed low blows. With this, you were allowed to do anything except bite or gouge your opponent's eyes. Strangulation was permitted, astonishingly. You could do virtually anything. It's a very, very vicious kind of sport. And as time goes by, they also have something that reminds them that physical training is something you did as a soldier for war, preparing for war. So they have a race which is running in full armor. Well, it's not actually full armor. It is, and here they're accurate, it is the helmet, and it is the greaves, the shin pads, and it is with a shield, which is heavy. The rest of them are nude. That genuinely nude. Now, normally you see soldiers on vases, and it is a heroic representation. They did not go into battle like this. But in the races, you were meant to be nude, but they're putting on the heavy helmet. They're putting on the shin pads, which really affects your running, and carrying the actual shield. And they had to run, and it's twice up and down the stadia. It's a kind of final event. It did peter out gradually. It's very much the hoplite armor of the day. So maybe the armor became out of date. Maybe they didn't want to be reminded it was a war training thing anymore. The only people who can participate, remember, are free male citizens. So no slaves. So you couldn't have slaves in this kind of kit, you see. You couldn't have murderers. You couldn't have people who'd broken the truce. You had to be free. You had to be male as well. Now, if you got things wrong, corporal punishment. If you made a false start, you could get beaten. When we have the false starts in the sprinting and everybody has to trudge back, it was clearly a big problem, big enough to merit something humiliating for a citizen. You were putting yourself into a different world where you could be beaten, physically beaten. Eventually, there were 18 events over 5 days. So you've got your runners in armor, you've got your naked runners, you've got your javelin throwers, and down here on this bottom section, you've got the wrestling, you've got what's probably the Pancratium. You can see him with his finger held up. And that is an appeal for stop. That is a submission. That is how you said, enough, this stops now. And you can see the referees with their sticks, their staves, because when you're in mid-fight, you don't just say, sorry, boys, could you just stop? You have to actually separate them rather. And there in the middle, the flute players, the double flutes, which are so important for all rituals in Greek and Roman. The discus thrower here, here's the runner with his armor and a runner who's naked. It's a very, very physical. It is energetic. It is testing you to your limits. But the music I mentioned, well, these are archaic little figures from Cyprus, actually, but I love them. There's the double flute player, and these are figures which have been put in a temple. And I include it here because this gives you something of the energy of it all. Vases are all well and good, but look at these characters. They're all colourful. They've got all their things on. They're hitting a tambourine, playing the lute, but the flute is what you had at the Olympic Games. But they are raising the rafters. Music, noise, the crowds were boisterous. We know that. They shouted, and they weren't sitting meekly watching like this. They were shouting. They were very much involved in it all, a bit like a football match, really. And the music keeps the energy going. And you can sense that energy in these figurines as to what music can do for you. Well, music contests come into it. They start to have them, not in the Olympic Games, but the Pythian certainly did. And here you have a herald and a musician. And they would say what we now have, commentators, and we have the loudspeakers. They had trained people to announce what the events were and to announce the winners. And it is a profession. It's a skill. And they helped to coordinate the movement, especially the pentathlon, especially the long jump. And here you can see the musician playing there as the discus thrower launches. But there were horses included as well. We're in the Iron Age, And horses in Britain and in Greece, horses are very much an elite feature of life. And if you go to the geometric art of the time, 750, 735, there's this huge vase here with a warrior with chariots. I love this. Count the legs. It's quite hard to do. So how many horses you've got. And women had little boxes with horses on. They could own horses. Women couldn't partake in the Olympic Games. They couldn't even watch, although the debate goes on, but they certainly could own the horses. And the owner is technically the winner, really, although the charioteer gets all the glory as well. But the winner is there as the owner is there as well. So not there in person, but there in the victory lists. So it's quite possible that you have to have a lot of wealth to have the horses, and that women could do this as well. So they have the chariot races added. Horse racing as well is included. And here you have a turning post for them to turn around. And you can see that if this is accurate, there's no, well, we know there's no stirrups. It looks like there's no saddles either. It's bareback riding. It's a dangerous pastime. These look very large horses as well, which usually in antiquity, they were much smaller. These are racing horses. And as we say, there are no women, and yet we have this inscription from quite late, early 300s in Olympia. Kings of Sparta are my father and brothers. This is an inscription. Caniska, that's a woman's name, victorious with a chariot of swift-footed horses, have erected this statue. I declare myself the only woman in all Hellas to have won this crown. It's very, very rare. Spartan women did partake in physical sports and exercises. So Spartan women sometimes got through the loop, rather. You can tell this isn't the Spartan woman. But there you have the horses really surging out. And you can tell by the number of legs that you have got more than 2 horses here. You sometimes had 2 horses, you sometimes had 4. And the Charioteer Delphi. If you've been to Delphi, you will go to the museum, hopefully. And at the end of the museum, there is the Charioteer of the Archaic Age, this very severe end of Archaic, pre-classical. He's very stern, he's looking ahead, he's intent, he's holding the reins. The whole group used to have the chariot and the horses, and he's very intent on winning. This is the victor. His statue goes up. This is what you go for. If you want fame, glory, eternal fame, and to be rewarded by your home city, your home polis, the statue and your eternal fame is what you're after. And a bronze charioteer at Delphi is a votive offering. He once held the reins. You can see how still he is, how controlled, and how wonderful this bronze statue is made. It's just magnificent. You visit and you just walk around him, gazing at him. He holds your gaze fantastically. Polyzalos dedicated me, the victor, actually dedicating the statue. Now, we think that this might be the same chap. He was from Sicily, and the votive offering in Delphi is this very formal dedication to the gods. Now, this chap, and there's a close-up on the left, is in Mocha, which is a tiny island off Sicily, and this was found, and we think it's the same fellow, but you can see his hand on his hip here, a very see-through robe, shall we say, quite a character. Certainly no attempt to pretend he's this stern, serious fellow if it is the same chap. This is his victory statue at home, where you recognize him as the person that he is. So it's a transition time for art as well. But the statue, the formal statue, is really important in Delphi. And if you're really the victor, then the games get called after you that year. It's one of the ways of organizing what year it is. Now, torch games. Not just torchbearers running in to bring the Olympic flame, but races where you had a relay of runners and they had to hand not the baton, but the torch. That's the difference. When you watch the runners, imagine them running with a flaming torch. How terrifying would that be? And the torch mustn't go out, of course. How many got burnt? Who knows? The victory team, one of them gets to light the altar's fire for the sacrifices. It's the honor that you get. But if you can imagine not just running in a sedate lay with the torch and coming in and holding it aloft as you come in. It originated from a race, but not in Olympia. Olympia did not have this race, but the others who had the games did. So the modern torch carrying is a connection of different ideas from different games. Now, the musicians, you see, they herald the winners. So you can see him putting his head back and really shouting. 396, they have a Tropitos and heralds competition. Apparently, there was a bit of a big debate about whether you should have musicians doing this. It was deemed right, it was deemed wrong, all sorts of things. But they did have it, and the winner is the one who can be heard clearly furthest away. It's a professional pride. It'd be a great honor to be the winner of this. You would be known just like the athletes. What do you get as your prizes? Well, once upon a time, tripods, and here's a victory chap taking his tripod. If you go to museums with Greek items, you might see bronze tripods. And in the Bronze Age, tripods had been very much the gift, the thing that you give, the elite all around the Greek world and their extended sort of connections would exchange gifts. And so we end up with Greek items right the way into Gaul even. And these tripods are made from bronze, one of the most valued materials. Tripods are the thing. And so you get a tripod as a victory. But as time goes by, a much cheaper option is you get given a crown made of plants, very much a short-lived victory kind of thing. Here is Nike, winged victory, giving the victor, metaphorically here, giving the victor the actual wreath. And victory has wings, by the way, because she flies swiftly from one side to the other. Victory can be there and then it can be there. In a moment, you know, when it all turns around, you think you're going to win and then someone else wins. Victory flies from one to the other. That's why she has wings. She moves so fast. And you would get a victory urn, and that's what we're looking at here, is the pictures on the victory urns. And they're probably full of oil, which is your stock trade item. You might have a year's supply of oil, olive oil, that you would use to keep your muscles supple, and if you're wrestling, to actually make yourself slippery, etc. So this is a very worthwhile prize to have. So you might get your pine wreath. If you're in Isthmus, you have different wreaths for different games. You have here a victory urn. Here it's Nemean, one of the ones near Corinth, which has the celery plant as its wreath. And yet this plaque here is from the AD 100s in the Roman times. Ritual is very conservative, and they keep doing the same things. It's religion, ritual doesn't change. You do things the way that it's the right way to do things, and conservatively with a small c. So in the Roman era, you're still doing some of the same things. Here are some of the urns, and you often find this is the same urn, front and back, clearly a chariot winner. And on the back is Athena. And you will often get the Panhellenic games, the ones, all of the areas of Greece, you have Athena on one side and the race on the other. And when the victor returns home, they are greeted like football heroes. They have this wonderful parade as they arrive. They are given all sorts, they're given money, they're given privilege for life. It's not a flash in the pan fame. This is because you've put that polis, that hometown, on the map of the games, the Panhellenic games, which will forever know that this city produced the best whatever in that year. It's a huge honor. Well, when the games are ending, it's still, well, party time, really. This is in Syracuse. It's a hecatomb. It's a site where 100 oxen are sacrificed. It's huge, absolutely huge. We go, really? Sacrificing 100 oxen? Well, it's a very, very big feast, really. It's a barbecue. You're going to feed everybody with a party. 100 oxen feeds a lot of people, and there could be 30,000, 40,000 spectators in a stadium. So you've got a lot of people to feed, and it's free food time, really. The sacrifices are all about giving to the gods their due and then eating the edible bit yourselves. For some people, might be the only meat that they get if you were poor. Well, looking back at that map, a Pythian up in Delphi, dedicated to Apollo. 4 years gap between, just like in Olympia, just like we have now. They had music because Apollo is the god of music and poetry, etc. Athletics as well. He is the god of youth, young men as well, and also horse racing. So we have vases with singers singing their little hearts out as well. So the Pythian Games, slightly different emphasis. It's Apollo, it's not for Zeus. The Isthmian Games are to Poseidon. Now, the Isthmus is that little bit of land where the Corinth Canal goes. And so you have Poseidon on one side and the other. And he is the giver of horses for humanity. So, of course, horse races will be part of it. It's not till the 400s and 300s BC that music contests are included in these two games. And so they start up a bit later. And you have this as a sort of circuit. So you'd have two of the games going on 1 year. In fact, two of them are 4 yearly and two of them are 2 yearly out of the big ones. So you have games every single year. It's not just 4 yearly, it's just that you have them in different sites and locations. And people will come to these festivals and these games from all over. It really is a major part of Greek year, if you like, Greek life. And it helps to actually get the calendar right. Those 4 years was part of the making of a calendar for the first time for the Greeks. Now there's a debate. You'll see lots of theses. Were women allowed to watch or participate? Looks like in Olympia they were not. Not because they were anti-women, although women usually in Greek world had a fairly shut away life, except for festivals, fetching water, etc. But in Olympia, it's because it's ritual. There are certain rituals that women must not participate in, etc. Now, that says Parthenos. The Parthenon is the temple to the maiden. And gynae, which we get gynecologist and the like from, is a woman, a mature woman, not necessarily age, but she's married and is now engaged in sex, basically. But Parthenos, with an R, normally is a woman or usually a girl. And girls who were not married, there's a different status for them, were considered able to participate in some things or to watch. Now, there's a big to-do about nakedness about this. People go, oh, were the women not allowed because it was naked? They had a very different approach to nakedness then. Remember, it was a glory, but only in the exercise area, etc. And only in particular places, not around the street, etc. So we do know that Sparta, the women took part in lots of physical exercise as well. And some of the girls took part separately as well. Now, when Alexander the Great spreads the Greek Empire around, this is Aphrodisias, which is in Turkey. And with Alexander the Great goes the Greek culture. And with the culture goes the games. So big cities will have games, they'll have theatres, they'll have stadium. And this is the Aphrodisias one. And you can see how big it is. There's a couple of people in the middle of it there. It's a heck of a run from one end to the other. Most people on tour, they might start running and they'll get about here from the other end and go, enough of that. But we're not usually 20-year-olds who are hyped on adrenaline and testosterone and competition and the agony of it all, that urge to compete and to do well. So especially when you're on a cruise, you're really not usually in a sporting environment. But all around the Greek world, you get people trying to have games of their own. It's a dedication to gods always. And it continues. And one of the first Roman games is when Augustus, who was Octavian to start with, won his Battle of Actium in 31 BC. And the Temple of Apollo was on the shore watching down. And he says, well, if you give me the victory, I shall dedicate games to you. I shall have your temple next to my house, etc., etc. And he wins. So here at Actium is a town, Nicopolis, which is the sports town. It is quite literally an Olympic, not Olympic, but a games village. And it's built specifically, and they are 4 yearly. He's celebrating in the way that Greece celebrates things. Nero, notoriously, go to the British Museum's exhibition on Nero that's on now, and you'll hear more about this. He has his own games. He loves the Greek culture. He has music, gymnastics, equestrian, athletics, all the things that the games have. And he makes them 5 yearly, a quinquennial game constituted. Curtamen is their equivalent of the contest, the competition, the battle between each other. And here is the discus on his coin, and a victory urn and rather faded victory wreath on the coin celebrating it, bringing Greek culture into Rome. Well, it's not based on the Pythian. It's based on the Pythian rather, not the Olympic, because of the music. And remember, he's the one who's said to have fiddled while Rome burnt. Well, it may or may not be true. It's another story. But he certainly loved playing the music. And that's something you do when you're singing an epic song. So he just adored it all. He adored it so much that not only did he have his own games, he travelled down from Rome, down the roads to Brundisium, went across to Corcyra, then to Actium, where the games took place from Augustus's time, and Delphi, and Corinth, and Nemea, and Olympia, the 4 big sites for the Olympic Games, the Panhellenic Games, rather. Now, usually they're scattered over the years. They have this 4-year timetable. He just had them all do it in 1 year because the emperor's coming and he wants to take part in them all. So you'll have to squidge it into my timetable. And so he can do this mini tour. And of course, he won everything as he competed. Even when he fell out of the chariot and was nearly killed, he still won. It's not quite the spirit of the games that had been going on. Well, here's a mosaic of the winners' prizes and palms. This is money bags. Clearly, you want some financial reward, the victory palm that's there. However, it's not that far off the end of the games. 393, Emperor Theodosius bans all pagan cults, and that includes the games, because they are dedicated to the pagan gods. The sports and everything have no problem with, but it's what they're for. And they're there in the shadow of the temple, in the sanctuaries, always in the sanctuaries, always dedicated to the gods. Now, it doesn't have that aspect to it. That's partly because it was banned, because it's not Christian, and all pagan cults must be stopped. Well, 1896 in Athens was when French Baron de Coubertin, when he was in Paris, announced he wanted to bring back the Olympic Games, but not as just the Greeks, as an international. Let's bring everybody together that we can, well, nearly everybody. And they rebuilt the stadium. When you go to Athens, this is what you see. It's a modern stadium built on the site of the old stadium so that they could bring back, perhaps not the values, not the nakedness, not well, there's the agony of the competition and the effort that's involved. Certainly stricter rules are required, but there's still the procession, there's still the torch is the part of the ritual, but now as the procession, not as a race. You can imagine now health and safety would go, no, you can't run with a fire-branded torch. So there are certain things which have changed, which our culture has changed. It is open, there are men, there are women, etc. Now, it has become modernized. It's not particularly a religious thing now. It's a sporting event. And what an insight, a brainwave to bring back the Olympic Games. When you think about it, what a big jump it is to say, I tell you what, this ancient pagan thing, let's bring it back. Because it used to draw everyone together. And there was this truce during the time. And it's sort of a symbol of that we bring together people again, and hopefully in peace with no cheating, etc., etc. all such big events are going to be troubled by something or other at some point. So it may not be the ideal. We don't have the ideal of the male naked youth anymore. We have an ideal really of bringing people together in sporting spirit. And you are pushed now to have world records, not just be the first, but to be better than anyone has ever done before. How often do you watch and they say, oh, his personal best is beaten, whichever record is beaten, then the world record has been beaten, and that's when you start to sit up and go, this is the fastest man ever, or the one who can throw further ever recorded. The actual activities are extended and expanded, but thank goodness the I can't say it, that wrestling has gone, where you're not really meant to be injuring permanently or killing your opponents anymore. It has changed essentially, but I think when the Olympics start in July, I hope you'll have some more idea as to what it all originally was. And sometimes it wasn't so very different, was it? In some of the sports that we do, and indeed in some of the rituals, shall we say, that we do. Some of the traditions, some of the pomp and circumstance is all there. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And we shall come off. I shall get the chat box going. And if you've got questions, please, there you go. It wasn't me who had the interruption, obviously. I see that there's no problem there. I hope that you managed to get back with us as quickly as I did. Right, thank you very much. Right, so questions. If you've got any questions at all, just ask. I'll shut down find the stop share so you can see me properly. There we go. If you go to speaker view, you've got me large rather than a little tiny box. Hello. And there we are. It's nearly 3,000 years ago that the Olympic Games were started, an inspiration to worship Zeus. And it just kept going. It's amazing when something keeps going through the Archaic period, through the Iron Age, through the Classical period, through even the Romans invading, it was still deemed something wonderful to keep doing. It was deemed a good, a noble, an uplifting kind of event. And so it just kept going until the pagan side of it pushed it off. Had it not been connected with the gods, then maybe it would have continued right the way through. But on the other hand, they wouldn't have started unless they were for the gods. So you can't have it always, can you? Right, I see a question or two popping up now. How long do you think it will be until the current Olympic Games stops, and why? Well, why did it stop before was because it was no longer deemed appropriate, because there were so many sacrifices, there were prayers involved, the oaths were all said to the gods, etc. That the raison d'etre for the games was based on that, and that was what was unacceptable. I don't think we have a similar problem now in any shape. What we have is political instability between peoples, and just as the Greeks did, but they declared a truce during it. And if you didn't obey that truce during that time, then you were banned from competing again. And people were so desperate to be part of it that Alexander the Great was going, pick me, I'm a Greek. I'm genuinely a Greek. And they're going, no, you're from Macedon up there. And he basically persuaded them that he could partake. He was as Greek as anybody else. People wanted to be part of it. And I think it was one culture, remember, a Greek culture. Then the Romans accepted it, and the Romans said foreigners can join in, because the Romans had the whole empire full of foreigners for the Greeks. So they said, we shall wrap it up in a Roman style and let everybody take part. Let's hope that the Olympic Games keeps going and keeps the torch going of the idealism, because idealism may not be achieved, but it's certainly something to target and aim for. And, working together in a competition. Competition is ritualized warfare. It is saying, I'm against you and you're against me, but there are rules. And that's better than the warfare, which did have rules as well, in a sense. A bit commercial, though. And yes, yeah, they are a bit commercial. Isn't that true? I'm sure they were then in many ways, actually. They were a bit partisan to their city-states. I think they might have said similar kind of accusations. It's not as ideal as you'd like it to be. But yeah, it's now, yeah, it's a complex thing. It doesn't have the raison d'etre that was clear, like the Olympics had at the beginning. It has everybody with their own agendas. And it's a bit like the Eurovision Song Contest, why did we get no points? After Brexit, who's going to vote for us? It's that kind of level. So, yeah, it is complicated now. And it was complicated in a different way then, I think. So, yeah, more questions. Anything about what they used to do? Thank you for the kind words, everyone. Who paid for the games? Yes, now that's they had sponsors. Well, the host city is the one who sets it up. Elis, the city near the Olympia, set it up. But if you did something wrong, you had fines. But those fines were used to put up statues of Zeus. And there was sort of a reminder, a warning. So there was this avenue of these statues are here because people have put money into the fines. It's the elite always pay for things in the ancient world. It's a badge of honor in a way. And the sanctuaries, I don't think they were very poor. I think they did all right. It's a bit like the monasteries in the medieval time, to be honest. Start off as they did, were poor and chaste and all of that. And then suddenly you have an embarrassment of riches because everybody says, so how holy you are, let us give you something. And before you know it, you're not being poor and all of that. So yes, it's all, just scroll down. I've just accidentally scrolled the wrong way. Let's work my way down again. Any more questions? I'm very happy to, taxpayers as always. Well, yes, who knows where all the funds necessarily came from directly. Any other questions? Yeah.
Gillian, thank you very much. I don't think we've got any more questions. Obviously, you have got another question.
Skateboarding and surfing. Yeah, it must be a bit like when the Greeks said we're going to have horse racing or we're going to have the music. When they had the music, it was a huge row. That's not a sporting event kind of thing, but actually it's a very physical thing, music and speaking and the like. Do they improve or make the games worse? Well, it's doing what the Greeks did. It's responding to what they think people, there are people who want to do it. I'm sure it's the sports themselves that want to be featured in the Olympic Games to help boost that sport, etc. We have such a variety now. Every generation goes, what do you mean that's a sport? But it's, why not? They might be a bit fringe for some of us. But remember, there was only one racetrack run at the beginning of the Olympic Games, just one sporting element. It's all part of, if you go to Delphi, you'll get a feel for it. You start at the bottom where you have the treasuries, where the different city-states have their goodies and their prizes and some of their stuff. You go past where there was very worldly things. There was news put up and all sorts. Then you go up a bit to the temple where the oracle is. So that's your spiritual element, shall we say, for want of another word. Right beside and above that is the theatre, the drama theatre, where you would mentally and emotionally have catharsis as you watch tragedies, and you would be cleansed of your fears and your anxieties and all of that. And you would watch humans and gods interacting, or the gods pushing the humans around, whichever part of the play you're looking at, and eventually possibly comedy to stop you wanting to just sob your way home at the end of it. And then you climb the hill and you get to the stadium at the top, and that's where the physical bit goes on. there. So it's an holistic experience. Not sure we have the holistic experience now, although, you know, when it's a good games, there's a buzz and an excitement about it. Goodness knows what it'll be this year. COVID restrictions will make it so odd. There was always the crowd shouting, yelling. You know, we're quite mute in our Olympic Games now. There's a lot of, and you're asked to be quiet while people are doing their gearing up for things. I think the crowds were a little bawdier than that then. So yeah, if we put new sports in, it's only what the Greeks did. They added all sorts of things, and they had huge arguments about it. Yes, we should have music. No, we shouldn't. So perhaps we're just doing the traditional thing, really, inventing, creating new, letting new things in, and then umming and ahhing and going, "It's never like that in my day," kind of thing. I don't know. It's my personal opinion. I'm not the most sporty of people. Few lecturers are, to be honest. But it's still good. Yeah, it's all variety. Brilliant. So, yes, thank you, John.
I think that just about wraps it up, unless anyone's got any other questions. But it just remains for me to thank you, Gillian, also known as the Muddy Archaeologist. So we very much look forward to welcoming Gillian back to summer school in 2022.
Look forward to it, yeah.
Very much hope to return. So thank you very much, everybody. Gillian, thank you, and good night, everybody, and have a good evening.
Yes, thank you. Good night. Be great.